Throughout my undergrad in applied linguistics, my teaching in Mexico, and this program, I've always tried to include teaching materials, examples, and sometimes even scaffolding in Students L1 because I feel like it makes them feel as if their language is verified and important within the classroom. Another reason that I'm a huge proponent of using the L1 as a scaffold is because I want all students to know that they do not have to forfeit their L1 as a result of learning English. One of the major advantages of learning another language is the ability to learn a new culture. I never want students to feel like they have to give up a part of themselves, in this instance, their language and their culture, in order to be linguistically and culturally proficient in English. Each LL brings their own flavor to their English experience, and I want to try to foster that identity to add to their existing identities. Language is not neutral, but a powerful social network that gives or denies learners the opportunity to speak. So with globalization and socio-political and cultural political issues in the classroom, May posits that we mustn't simplify the significance of power differences in language, the strength of identities and groups in social life, or the need for policies protecting local languages. Kanagaraja goes on to say that teaching English in a manner that complements rather than competes with local languages and local interest, leading to additive bilingualism in language and identity, is the new challenge for teachers. Teachers can no longer view culture as a general term, but as individuals, practices, beliefs, and manners of living, and furthermore, students' individual cultures cannot be separate from language, but must be seen as an intricate and inseparable part of their language. Ginza elaborates, the notion of culture is a dynamic entity, not simply a collection of foods, clothes, and holidays, but a way of using social, physical, spiritual, and economic resources to make one's way in the world. Por eso, es mi trabajo identificar la cultura de los estudiantes and help them use it to negotiate their position of power and identity within the English-speaking world. Teaching English in Mexico and teaching English in the United States are two very different experiences with two very different implications and interpretations. In Mexico, teaching English is a foreign language. It's seen as a language of opportunity, and all of my students were Mexican, making them members of the cultural and the linguistic majority. In the U.S., many times our students are here because they have to be here. So English is the language of necessity, and ELLs are in the cultural and linguistic minority. The scope in which we present English to ELLs might determine their successes and or failures in the language. Lightbound and Spada mention children as well as adults that are ELLs are sensitive to social dynamics and power relationships, especially when the learner comes from a group that is socially and therefore linguistically in a minority group. Our attitudes as teachers about students based on their native language or the variety of English that they speak can create self-fulfilling prophecies for these students where they might be afraid to participate, and as a result they will suffer academically and they will fall behind. So not only bringing the L1 into the classroom, but also bringing students' culture and funds of knowledge into the classroom will create an environment of cultural responsiveness through understanding. And in order to understand our students as individuals, I read a great amount about taking an ethnographic approach to interviewing and observing students and their families. Learning how to and striving to be objective in how we view our students before we know them and what we think we know about their culture means to state the characteristics of objects and events as they exist and not to interpret, evaluate, and prejudge them. And that was Frank. Getting to know students outside of school can offer more insight about the cultural practices of the family, home, and language than anything else. which reveals the accumulated bodies of knowledge of the household or the household's funds of knowledge. Teachers typically know their students in one context. We know them as a student. However, the teacher in these home-based contexts of learning will know the child as a whole person, not merely as a student, taking into account or having knowledge about the multiple spheres of activity within which the child is enmeshed. So home visits and interviews are useful because you can see the student in a different light. You see what interests them, you see what they carry in their funds of knowledge, and you see how their family values learning English and how their family values education. So the student's family and their community knows them as a whole person, whereas we know them as a student. Through displays of student representation within the classroom, as well as utilizing students' L1 and funds of knowledge to guide teaching, content, as well as style, the style in which you teach, students will respond positively within the classroom because they feel as if they're properly represented within the classroom, and they'll feel as if what they are learning is culturally meaningful and relevant to them.